If nothing in life is worth dying for, when did this begin? Just in the face of this enemy? Or should Moses have told the children of Israel to live in slavery under the pharaohs? Should Christ have refused the cross? Should the patriots at Concord Bridge have thrown down their guns and refused to fire the shot heard round the world? The martyrs of history were not fools. And our honored dead, who gave their lives to stop the advance of the Nazis, didn't die in vain. Where then is the road to peace? Well, it's a simple answer after all. You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay. There is a point beyond which they must not advance.
I've got another proof of that. It's shorter, and I'm trying to put video to it. But Adam has to like it first. And if he doesn't like it, then we're going to go with this. I'm just kidding.
Anybody remember the old John Wayne movie, The Shootist?
Yeah. Remember it. It's one of my favorite films.
It's like when
especially since it was his last film.
That's right. It's like there's a lot of people who are fast and some are accurate, but not many are willing. Says it all.
All right. So real quick, we should probably introduce everybody. Adam, I'll let you introduce yourself. You're the co-host here at Armed Republic Radio.
So I'm Adam Winch here. I run Defenders USA. Law enforcement background, over 10 years. Street crimes, patrol, SWAT team, trainer, and been running Defenders USA as a training company now for, full-time since 2013. And pretty much about it.
And we got a really cool guest on with us tonight, John McLaughlin. We've been friends with you for a few years now. Really got close to you when we did the active self-protection instructor training program. Got to meet your family, got to work with your kids a little bit.
Right.
And, I knew your name was familiar, but I just never put two and two together. But I can't tell you how much countless video I watched that you probably more than likely recorded back in the day with your past. So tell us all about you.
Well, my real life job that paid the bills for 31 years was a TV meteorologist. I specialized in Doppler radar systems and severe weather. So my passion was keeping people safe, making them aware of things that can hurt or kill them in the middle of the night. And my motto was basically, if there's something dangerous that's out there in the sky, I'm going to be there watching. And I did that for 3 decades in Des Moines, Iowa. I also taught people how to stay alive in their worst day in airplanes and helicopters. To this day, I'm a FAA examiner. And just for instance, today I was flying a Citation jet with a friend of mine and a lot of people in the back. And just a small problem with a radio that went out, GPS that went out, couldn't talk to air traffic control. And, just handled everything smoothly without stress because we've already trained for our worst day. So when these small things happen, it's just like no big deal. And that's something I just bring up to people. It's like, you guys want to train all the time for these worst events, the F5 tornado, the school type events we're going to talk about tonight. And when you train at that high level, when the smaller things happen, your stress level just stays really low, and that helps win the day. So that's kind of been my goal, not just from aviation and meteorology, but I ran a company in Iowa for 12 years called Learn to Shoot Iowa, where I literally trained thousands of concealed carriers and tried to move them past just the simple couple hour NRA course to 2 to 4 day courses. And some all went summer long to help especially church groups. And so I volunteer even now with faith-based security networks, help churches get organized and get people squared away, both with firearms and medical.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember there was, now we're going to turn to the weather with John McLaughlin,
Right.
so many times as a child. And not that you're that much older than me, but I remember it being a long time ago.
Right.
So I'm David Laird. I'm the owner of Dynamic Combative Solutions. Long time family history of being here in the United States, serving in the United States Army before its inception. Got boys currently serving overseas actually now. And when I got out, I volunteer with the local Maricopa County Sheriff's Department for 4 years. And then I went overseas as a civilian contractor in 2007, 2008. And when I came home, got heavily involved in church security, which required a lot of training, and got involved with doing that and decided to go on my own a few years later in 2019. And it's been kind of a roller coaster ride ever since. And lately, I've been focusing a lot on defending the Second Amendment, and been working with the Arizona Citizens Defense League and bringing an active school shooter program here to Arizona. It's called F.A.S.T.E.R Saves Lives, which is based out of Ohio and developed by TDI. Went there, trained there, working on getting completely certified by those guys because I think it's an excellent program. And it ties right into everything else I'm doing. I'm also still currently a civilian security contractor for a big company here in Arizona, and that's kept me pretty occupied. It's supposed to be an easy gig. It's supposed to be, just show up, take the money, and go home. And it's consumed a lot of time, but it still allows me to do a lot of the things I need to do. So, and I know with the most recent events happening down in Texas, I know all of us have been dying to talk to each other about the stuff that's been going on. And we know that these things are constantly evolving as far as how, the information is coming out. And sometimes that information is a little premature. It's not always accurate. We're currently, today's date is the 26th of May. It's late at night after we've all put in full days. And we're at the point now where we have 19 school children who lost their lives, 2 teachers, and a grandmother, as well as the husband of one of the teachers today suffered a heart attack. We've learned today that this all started at the boy's home, what seems to be maybe an argument over a phone bill of some kind, that he made some statements on social media that he intended on shooting up a school, but only about 30 minutes of forewarning before he attacked his grandmother, shot her in the face, went through her cheek and out her ear, left the house in a pickup truck that he doesn't have a license for, doesn't know how to drive, got into a shootout somewhere down the street with police officers who chased him to the school where he wrecked the truck. Upon trying to get into the school, one officer engaged him, and that forced him to drop his backpack. He was injured. He returned fire with what is to be believed right now the Daniel Defense rifle. He left another rifle in the truck. And they retrieved 7 30-round magazines from inside the school. We don't know how many rounds were actually fired. He managed to get into the one and only door that seems to be in the back that was unlocked. It allowed him to gain entry to a classroom, which joined another classroom where he made some statements in there, basically threatening everyone's lives. And it sounds as though the local police waited outdoors for approximately 60 minutes before Border Patrol agents down the street were able to arrive on scene, gain entry, and take out the shooter. We've also learned that some of those local police were preventing parents from being able to gain entry because they had arrived at the school, that a taser was employed on at least one father. We don't know if any of them were armed or if they could have done anything. I can see where some law enforcement would say, no, you can't go in there. That's just going to add to the body count. It's not safe. We'll get Adam's thoughts on that with his career in law enforcement. Personally, I know I wouldn't show up to an active shooter event without my shit as a dad. And I don't think there'd be too many guys standing in my way from getting entry if I wanted to get in there and help my kids either. So, but I know emotions are really high right now. I think everybody has a lot of thoughts and feelings. There's been obviously both sides of the aisle. I think it might just be me that I feel like our side has been louder and more pronounced, but I tend to surround myself with people that are of the same like-minded opinion. So, John, you've been following this just as closely as I have. You put out a really amazing statement that I just thought was really well written. I shared that on the Arizona Citizens Defense League, which is our local Second Amendment group. It's got 3,500 views, I think, so far there. Tell us, what were your thoughts when you were learning about all this initially?
Yeah, you mentioned Second Amendment. I totally didn't mention that. I'm the chair right now of the Iowa Firearms Coalition, so kind of doing in the Midwest what you guys are doing down in Arizona. The first thing is, of course, as a father, you would go through a a river full of crocodiles to save your kids. And just the thought of those kids dying without anybody there defending them is just, as a human, as a believer in Christ, and as a dad, it's just unbelievable. And I've never lost a child to some kind of tragedy, and my heart breaks for those that have. And you just can't imagine how one could go on, without your flesh and blood and something like that. And it just kind of hardens my resolve to speak the truth. And the truth is that we can't stop evil with legislation. We can't stop evil with these, let's take all the guns away, or let's restrict the AR-15, or let's keep people from having body armor. That it may sound good, it might feel good, it might make some people feel like they're doing the right thing, but that simply is a falsehood. That I think it's time that those of us that stand on the side of freedom and liberty and the Second Amendment just have to say, you know what, enough of this. We've gradually eroded our freedoms, and it's time to say no more.
What I hear being really popular right now is the do something movement, is what I like to call it. There's a lot of people that are like, we got to do something. We've had all this time elapse and we've done nothing to pass any new gun laws. So now is the time that we act while heartstrings are being pulled on. We need to do something. And that sounds really brash if you think about it. We're talking about, let's vote on something permanent right now when we're not thinking clear-headed, and we're only getting bits and pieces of the information, and everybody that is in, I would say, the law enforcement and even the federal law enforcement level is going to examine everything: the tactics, the firearms employed, the response time, the medical alerts, the training before, the training after. I heard today that there was a local law enforcement was practicing for active shooters at that school 2 weeks before.
Wow.
And then we had actually a reserve school officer on campus that the other one came to relieve him, that he wasn't at his post. So it sounds like this school had a lot of stuff in place, and yet still this is all the stuff that we've gotten behind. We said, yeah, school resource officers, but obviously that's only as good as the training is and stuff. So we have to go back and look and see, well, what part of this system failed? Because this is everything that we all believe in and we feel is the right tools, the right measures to have this over with quickly. So why did it all fail? If they were doing all this stuff the right way, why did it all fail? Adam, let me get your thoughts real quick, because I know you've been busy doing a lot of traveling, and you probably just got filled in on a couple of things that maybe you weren't entirely aware of. But what were your first thoughts when you started hearing these news reports and stuff?
Yeah, I just learned things from you that I'd not heard yet. I've been kind of waiting for more official reports to come out. Having seen it too many times in the courts, or in cases, right, what comes out publicly or certainly online, oftentimes you find out later is not true. And so to me, it's been important to hear more and more to finally get some kind of truth. So a lot of the details you gave, Dave, especially with me being so busy recently, I've not even followed or noticed it or heard of it even yet. I know for us, especially after Columbine, and after Columbine, it became standard operating procedure for us as cops that if a shooting goes off, you go straight to threat. It doesn't matter if you wait or not, or if you have other people or not, you go. In fact, we get into debates in our
what year was Columbine? Because we can talk a little bit about Columbine, and I mean that really set a lot of precedent because of what we learned from that one incident. Because we used old tactics in Columbine. The old tactics were showing up and secure the area and form an evacuation plan, and everything was going in slow. There were secondary devices that we learned about later out in the parking lot, etc. And I mean, you being from Colorado and law enforcement, you guys, more than probably anybody else in the nation, trained very heavily based on what you learned from Columbine. It's kind of set the forward pace of schools and churches moving forward after that event.
Yeah, I don't actually remember the exact year, but I did a lot of training with the guys. The SWAT teams who actually went into Columbine directly with guys who did a lot of pretty rough stuff with that and retained a lot of PTSD from it. So did a lot of training with those guys. Because of that, I mean, it became a immediate precedent for us. And it changed literally legally for us that you go in. You no longer held back, waiting for each other for backup, calling in resources. You just went. We get into debates in our briefing as we were going through all the changes that came about because of Columbine, about how I'm sitting there going, if it happens, I'm going straight in. And some of the veteran cops are like, no, you wait 30 seconds till somebody else gets there and we go together. And I'm like, no, not at all. I mean, it's my kids, or if it's not my kids, I view them as my kids. I'm going. I don't care. It's a one-man show. You go directly to the threat. You find the threat. And if other cops happen to catch up, so be it. Great. We can work better as a team. But if not, I'm going. And it was literally a division amongst kind of the veteran cops, the new cops, about which way to go because of training. And I was lucky enough to come to the training side of this and become a rookie cop and then a veteran over the time frame. After the decision was already made, you just go.
Yeah.
So in this case with Texas, I know for me as a cop, if these shots are going off, I don't care if everybody else standing around. I'm going through those doors. I'm going through that window. I'm going through the wall if I have to.
Well, we saw, let's say in the Florida school shooting, that they had a school resource officer who was videotaped and ended up losing his career because we could observe that he was waiting outside, that he was unsure of how to make entry. And again, I know a lot of people make the assumption that because you're law enforcement, that you've had the training, that you are prepared for that day. But we always talk about in training, hey, listen, you don't know how you're going to react until you're actually faced with those real life consequences. And I feel like one of the things that you're probably thinking about is, if I go in, am I going to make the situation better or am I going to make it worse? And so I can see where maybe that in that particular case in Florida, maybe he was concerned about self-preservation, how many years he had in the force, etc. Or maybe it was, am I going to make the situation better? Am I going to make the situation worse? So again,
if that's the case, get out of law enforcement.
I concur.
If you're going to make it worse, you can't make it worse by going in.
But
right?
what I'm saying is like you don't have that realization until you're faced with it for real in that moment.
That could be, but
I think training can overcome that. So,
yeah, you have to make not just training, because that's the problem. Too many people rely on the training. You have to make a heart set decision. It's not a mindset, it's a heart set. You have to make that heart set decision that is internal to you and personal to you, that you will go in no matter what. It's not a mindset. And that's the problem I see with so much training is we talk about it and the trainers are trying to get that mindset, I would say that heart set into people, but that's an individualistic decision you must absolutely make. And it's harder than most people realize. And until they make that true, honest decision, squaring it before their God, before their moral compass, but before even their family, before even their own personal fears, that they will go in no matter what, they will go in. Oftentimes people hold back, and I've seen it. I've seen it in cops. I've seen it in soldiers. I've seen it in civilians. I had an experience once where I held back for a second and realized you can't do this. You have to go. So that decision has to be made ahead of time. And oftentimes I think that we've not discussed it or talked about it enough in the law enforcement world to where, in other areas, even the civilian defensive world, to where we've discussed it through enough to where people realize the gravity of the situation they're going to do and made that heart set decision, I will go no matter what.
So prime example is just recently we had a law enforcement officer that had to take a headshot. And they released the body cam footage of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it is so instinctual. It is so quick. He grabs that rifle out of the rack as the car comes to a stop. The door flies open. He takes that bead, and almost instantaneously that shot goes off. And so it's a hostage type situation where that bullet is narrowly passing by the person you're trying to save and getting the suspect between the eyes. And watching that video for the first time, first thing that I felt personally watching the video was butt pucker when you get that sight picture, remembering what's my holdover at this distance. It's a split second thought. It feels like an eternity, but then you press that trigger and you get your clean shot.
In one way, I'd tell you it's apples and oranges. I understand what you're saying, but that's going to the known. You see it, you know it's there, and you've trained to deal with it. The hard part of, say, a Columbine, maybe this incident in Texas, wherever it is going to the unknown, breaching through doorways or windows or walls to go to find and hunt down a human predator who's already made that commitment to do so, has shown the propensity for extreme violence, and to just literally, possibly from a mental level, walk into a wall of bullets. Unfortunately, when you sign up in the law enforcement world, and I'd tell you as the responsible citizen willing to defend life and carrying a gun to defend life, you might have to be the bullet sponge for others, right? Hopefully you won't be, but you might have to have that. So in the case of the Phoenix cop who pulled out his rifle, made a 40-yard shot straight to the center of the face, great job. That was going to the known. That's good. Excellently done. But going to the unknown, breaching into a large school like that with a lot of things going on chaotically, is a terrifying endeavor. And I think that we as the civilian defender trainers need to communicate that to our people who do this, to include not just the civilians who train, but the law enforcement. And it needs to be a decision every law enforcement officer makes, that no matter what, I will go in. And if it makes the situation worse, okay, but my intention is to make it better, and I will face that unknown.
John,
That's the thing to
you do a
do.
lot with church security. Tell us what it's like when you're training church security, because I would think that having done a lot of it myself, it's great if a church is able to find local community law enforcement that already attend the church, that are willing to volunteer time. And sometimes in some cases, we have a church down the street where they actually suit up in their off-duty gear and they're paid by the church to do stuff, and they can actually make arrests because they are active law enforcement. But other churches I've worked with, smaller congregations, smaller budget, and they rely heavily on civilian volunteers. And I have that conversation with them. Like, it needs to be more of a ministry. We need to minister to each other, and even when you go to the range, it's a ministry, but you have to have that conversation right out of the gate about, being right with Jesus and understanding what you're really signing up for before we even start going down the road of training. Tell me what your experience has been with that.
Yeah, our motto, pretty much everywhere I have worked, is missionaries first and gatekeepers second. You have to be loving, you have to be helpful, until people give you a reason not to. Then at that point, you have to instantly flip that switch and become the ultimate warrior with no fear of the outcome, because you're sure of your eternity. And as Adam said, if you become a bullet sponge, but that slows down the bad guy and saves lives, then so be it. And I have seen that mentality among civilian defenders, and certainly in recent events, Stephen Williford, Jack Wilson, we find people like that who are willing to do that. But then you're also going to have people on the team that don't have that commitment. But that's okay, because you know that ahead of time. Who are my guys that can go out and de-escalate? Who's my jiu-jitsu guy that can go out and go hands-on with someone that maybe is not a lethal threat, but needs to be held up for law enforcement to get there? So you can't treat everybody exactly the same. And I think we're doing that kind of on the school resource officer front. We're throwing these officers into schools and saying, you need to be ready for a low probability, high risk event that may never happen. But if it does, we want you to charge boldly in and handle the situation. And there are certainly SROs that will do that, but there's a lot of police agencies, I'm guessing, and I'm giving you information just from internal talks that I'm not going to mention names, but many schools, the officers that get placed there are probably not the ultimate warrior. They're the guy that, like, well, he's a little rough in this area, so let's send him to school because he's good with kids, or he can teach the DARE program, but he's probably not the guy that's going to charge in and save the day. Maybe more of the Florida situation, the Parkland event we saw.
I've heard some of the same stuff, and something that I've made an observation on, and it's something that I hold. You measure people when you meet them, okay? How they keep their uniform, how they keep themselves presentable, etc. Their physical fitness standards, all that sort of stuff. And you can really measure a person, attitudes, behaviors, their situational awareness, all that sort of stuff. And I've seen the same thing. And then again, you have some guys who, like Adam said, that have that heart, and you can tell by their appearance and their situational awareness and how they carry themselves on school campus. I mean, they can still be polite to the kids and that sort of stuff, but you can tell they're there to do a job and they're prepared to do it. It's so like there's a whole breadth of things that we can do. I know, one side says that the final solution is the firearm, and the other side says the final solution is to get rid of all firearms. And I want to say that I've witnessed with you and Adam specifically that we try to do a holistic approach. We're looking at the facilities, how your campus is laid out, the training that your faculty and staff have. How do you greet your guests when they come in? What kind of access are you allowing them? How can we create some funnels and slowdowns here and there? And what is the policies and procedures if X happens or Y happens? How can we challenge these threats outside the campus before they ever get on campus? Once they're on campus, how can we keep them from getting into the building? Once they're in the building, how can we deny their access getting through the building? And then first aid, CPR, TCCC medicine. What other, I mean, there's so many other things so many other great programs out there that you need to be a part of as well. I mean, even with my children's school, I was a very active parent. I approached the school administration day one, and my kids went to a charter school. It's kind of like a private school, kindergarten all the way up through high school, and told them, hey, look, even if you don't want me, I've got strong recommendations from a lot of people. I brought in the city SWAT department, introduced the SWAT captain to the school, let him give his recommendations, brought the fire chief in to do his recommendations. And, kids got to crawl over vehicles and they got to formulate. I mean, there's lots of other ways you can be an active parent and be involved. What are your thoughts on that, Adam?
No, I think you're absolutely right. Right, the holistic approach is the way to go. It's no different with anything in life, right? We especially in the gun community should be the kindest, most respectful, most open people in the world. And as John said, able to instantaneously flip the switch. Now that's us personally, or those that we train. I would suggest those of the teachers, the staff who are allowed to and willing to train should be able to do that too. At the same time, you need all the external factors to add into the safety, right? From literally lighting to bushes to locks to everything, how you funnel people through buildings. It needs to be done by approaching your local PD or local your sheriff's office, your local PD guys and girls, and getting them into the schools and bringing in your SWAT people so they can either see or take a look at. We were constantly, as a SWAT team, we were constantly looking for places to go to let us come to see them and see their building and layout that are high liability areas for targeting. And I was grateful where I was at that the schools allowed us to do that, and some of the churches and things like that. I think it's a big thing that schools should be reaching out to those people to do that, but not just the SWAT guys and girls. Because understand, though I loved being on the SWAT team, I knew we were only going to be there if we got the call. And we would be there 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe an hour later if we got the call, most likely. It's your average patrol guy or girl who's on the street who is going to be your first one to respond to that. And maybe they're on a SWAT team, maybe they're not. So reaching out to the local cops and getting them to come through and walk through that type of thing is great. And one of the best things you can do is the local guys and girls, right? The EMT's great. Have them take a look at it. Have them go through the place. The firefighters too, great. But really having your cops, your first responders who are going to come with guns. And until we get more trained guns in the school system itself, having those cops come through that are on the streets to do that. And then oftentimes encouraging the cops to locally be in the area. If they're not actively on calls at that time, hey, why not hang out somewhat close to school and write your report, right? If you've got to write up a ticket, you happen to do it at your
some schools have cleared out an office and they're like, this is your dedicated office. Come in.
Yeah.
A great thing, because now you have a squad car parked out front.
Yep.
You've got guys constantly coming in during their shift just to sit down, and I'm like, give them, coffee, bagels, donuts, whatever you
catch up on paperwork while they're there.
Keep that room stocked for them so they know that they can get a place of rest where, They get air conditioning, they get security, they get free Wi-Fi.
Well, and make it not only that, make it welcome and comfortable to them.
Yeah.
Because if not, we tend to go where one, the brass doesn't bother us, right? Especially day shift, right? That's what school is. Go where your brass isn't going to bother you, but where you can work on stuff. So if you make it welcoming and comfortable to them, that makes it easy for them to be there. And that's really a good thing, right? If you have an SRO in the school resource officer, then the other cops probably aren't going to come to it. But if it's a school without cops, making it an open, welcome thing to them, that is one of the best ways to get them there. And I mean, make them at ease as possible. So I think all the holistic stuff you're talking about is a great idea, with the addition of really, really, really making sure that average street cops on the day shifts during school know that is their home too, and they're welcome and loved there.
Which is even more important in your more rural areas. There are some departments, like here I can speak to, like the Phoenix Valley anyway. We have, we have DPS, which is our highway patrol. We have the Phoenix Law Enforcement Agency, massive agency. And so I believe they have a couple dedicated SWAT teams. I know Mesa has a couple dedicated SWAT teams, but also they've got guys in regular patrol cars that carry their SWAT gear around in their patrol cars. And they train and co-train with each other's SWAT teams. So, if you're in a city like Mesa that borders Gilbert, that borders Tempe, I mean, there's intersections where all three collide. Then you might have them all showing up in one area at one time. We broke up an incident in the town of Guadalupe on a Halloween night, and we were second on scene, and we had 2 DPS arrive. We had our gang unit showed up, and we had, I think, 1 or 2 Tempe squad cars show up. And because they work together so frequently, there wasn't any decision about who was doing what. The first car there just took the lead. Everybody else followed. We ended up breaking up like a dozen house parties that night, simultaneously. It was great.
Yeah. And understand, again, counting on a SWAT team is just not going to happen for the most part. Right. So, when I was,
what most folks probably don't know is there's a lot involved with the SWAT team. There's
a lot involved, right?
Equipment. What side of town are they on in order for them to have a quick response time?
Yeah. And the vast majority of us on a team are a part-time team, right? Even the largest cities where I come from, they only had a certain number of few people that are on a full-time SWAT team, and they're almost always off on training or leading training. So your average SWAT guy or girl is on a patrol unit, working a day shift, a swing shift, a night shift. So really focusing on for schools, the day shift or cops is one of the best ways you can do that. And therefore getting a hold of the day shift team sergeants saying, hey, look, bring as many of your guys and girls by as often as you can. We'd love to meet every one of them and sit down and chat with them. We got bagels here. We got whatever. And let's get to know them. I mean, and making them feel wonderful and welcome at that place tends to encourage them to come by. So,
church security is really important for that too, because most of us are plain clothes. So if they did arrive, we'd want to make sure that we were distinguishable from everybody else that's dressed in suits and ties on the day of worship, right? I mean, we are noticeable if you know what noticeable is supposed to look like.
Right.
John, I know that you probably have faced some of those same challenges with doing church security. Tell us about that. Have you reached out to local law enforcement?
Yeah, I mean, the church that I worked at most recently, at maximum, we're probably 4 to 7 minutes from a sheriff's office response. And I would say the best buy-in occurred after we ran several Alice training sessions where, it was simply some of us with Nerf rifles and going around and telling people that the run, hide, fight thing is a list of options. It's not an order of operation. And giving people kind of an insight into the mind of a criminal and how they attack. And when the door goes open, how their eyes basically go into the room and they're not carefully checking the corners and working the wedges and the spots behind the door like a law enforcement officer that has significant firearms training. And what it showed them is there are opportunities to counter ambush in these things. And we had several instances where people would okay, someone's banging on the door. They're coming in with their Nerf gun. They're trying to hold the door, but the door is not a good lock. The guy knows there's people in there. The door goes open. His eyes go. He starts instantly shooting Nerf darts at people. But the guy that was down, crouched to the side of the door, goes up and takes the guy out. And just things like that, that unless you train those things, even though it's a little funny, using Nerf guns, it at least gets a little bit of stress inoculation going. And we kind of went into three groups: those that I'm going to fight and I'm going to stop this event, and those that simply hid and were willing to die, and those that were instantly trying to run away no matter what, even if they went out through a door with no idea what was on the other side of the door, which was often another guy with a Nerf gun. So those scenarios, as harsh as it sounds, doing that at church, it bought the buy-in of the entire staff to say, okay, this is serious. We need to be trained as a staff. We need to be trained as our volunteers, and we need to support our security guys who are walking around in the heat for 4 or 5 hours every Saturday and Sunday with firearms, willing to put their lives on the line for the rest of us.
Yeah, I'm actually a really big fan of airsoft now. Airsoft has made leaps and bounds. I've used simunition with the military. I've used UTM with a lot of national training, law enforcement training, and stuff like that. But specifically, like with churches or when I'm training schools and stuff, I really like to use airsoft now because it does a lot of those same things, and it allows you to be more versatile. Like you can really train and practice anywhere when you're using airsoft or even a Nerf gun. And the focus really isn't about the firearm at that point. It's more about getting your heart pumping with that situation. You don't think it's going to be that real. But someone who's really creative at creating scenarios that are really lifelike, that really draw in your emotions to start with, are fantastic because you can see that person's mentality switch when they're faced with that confrontation. It goes from just, it can be something really slowly that it progresses, or it could be something that's just instant. All of a sudden you have to deal with it right now. And the fun part is seeing it fall apart and getting their reaction, putting them through another scenario that's similar, but you see the improvement because I personally feel like we learn so much better from surviving our mistakes than we do from just being dead perfect every single time.
Pat Rogers used to say that learning occurs after repeated demoralizing failure.
Right. And I think live firearm use, once you've gotten through that, getting into the live firearm use again, to face shoot house scenarios and stuff is also equally important because then a little bit more focus is on the firearm and, it's be feeling a little bit more real. And getting to do that. And there's so few places that allow you to do that. Adam, you do a lot of training with, just pretty much all that. You've been doing it with law enforcement, military, private security. Tell us some of the stuff that, you really enjoy doing to, I guess, the student to help them, tell us about that, where you see the unlock happen.
Well, to capitalize on something both you and John both said here is the training, the live fire aspect. To me, it really comes down to causing the brain to think through when stressed or under fear, right? And that only happens if we've discussed it, thought about it, talked about it, then applied a little bit of stress, whether it's with simunitions, airsoft, which I'm a big fan of too, just like you, Dave, and then letting them realize, okay, I didn't do so well this time. Let me think it through a little bit better. Okay, I could have done this, and now redoing it again. Then applying a little more pressure, find the faults in it, now thinking it through and figuring out, okay, what did I do wrong here? How could I have done it better? And then doing it again for success. Then now ratcheting up the pressure. So really, I like what you said, demoralizing failure, John, right? Is letting the failure happen, then coming back and considering why it happened and determining to fix it, fixing it on a next reiteration, then ratcheting up and constantly failure to success, failure to success, failure to success, but most importantly, thinking through the whys. And the more I found, Dave, as we've done it with all the training we've done with people in our urban tactics or building clearing and force on force, is that continual thought process applied after debilitating failure, continuing doing that over and over to the point where, okay, now I see more, understand more, and react better sooner. That brought more success faster. So I like what you're saying, the training, the force on force, but really to me, it's a thoughtful consideration of how to do this. So even just initiating the conversation of how to do it is helpful. Then adding maybe airsoft ammunitions if you can, but airsoft for most people now makes it even better. But just that mere opening of the mind to consider these things and talking this through helps people get a lot better. So to me, it's that mental process that helps the physical process. So if we build the gun skills great, then we build the mental process great. Now you combine the two, you've got a warrior on your hands.
Now, there's a lot of folks out there. I think when we initially were talking about after the Connecticut shooting, there's a lot of different trainers out there talking about, why can't we arm teachers? Okay. The School Gun Act went into effect in 91 and it's placed restrictions on states. You have to, according to federal law, you have to have a CCW that's honored in that state. And then it's up to the state to create the standards for who's allowed to conceal carry on campus, et cetera. And this whole debate got me really studying a lot of American laws and history. And I find it amusing when they were initially looking at the Federal Firearms Act in the early 1900s. They were going to include pistols and revolvers in with machine guns and short-barreled rifles and shotguns. And because specifically they said that they felt that anybody who concealed carry a firearm, that only criminals did that. And they weren't able to get those instruments approved. Okay, because at that time it was the standard that if you had a pistol, it was for personal protection, and you opened carried it. So I find it fascinating that we get all the way, to the early '90s is really when we started, states started issuing concealed carry permits, because prior to that, we didn't have a concealed carry standard because open carry was just so prevalent and common. And I think it's really important that we look back at all these past laws and how it's led us down this path, because as we have changed our culture, I mean, we've just grown up. I think a lot of folks today have grown up always assuming that restrictions have always been there. And one of the big arguments when we first started mentioning, why don't we let teachers be armed, was a lot of folks turned it into, well, we don't want to force teachers to be armed. And that was never mentioned by our side.
Right.
Okay. We're not saying we want to arm every teacher. I have met some teachers, and I can tell you right now, when we talk about heart and having the intestinal fortitude to stare at a gunman that potentially might be a child in their class, they are not prepared for that day. Okay. That is not what we're saying. But there are some retired military law enforcement that are school teachers. There are the administrative staff, there are principals, there are the maintenance guys, there are so many other people that work on that school campus who are willing to invest their own time and money, and potentially already have, and carry on a regular date basis, but disarm themselves when they arrive at school because the job requires it.
Right.
And I think a lot of folks think that normal civilians can't do what a law enforcement officer can do with this specific circumstance. Now, granted, I don't want to train every citizen on how to make arrests or that sort of stuff. That's not what we're really even care about. But we absolutely have self-defenders, like you said. And what do they call that? The barefoot warrior?
Barefoot defender.
Barefoot defender.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of getting to meet him just a few months ago. And to hear his story, and oh my God, get to hear it through his lens.
Yeah.
His
He called
thoughts
me right after Buffalo and sent a text right after this last thing, just how his heart is breaking, and watching the, the stuff that we're all talking about now. It's like, let the people that have that in their hearts. God hasn't called everybody to carry a firearm and be willing to do what you guys are willing to do.
Yeah.
But many could be used, if they're given some training and already have that mindset. Going back to the Parkland shooting in Florida for a minute, I was just really wrenching, like, what can I do as, a single person in the state of Iowa? And so we offered 4 days of firearms training to any teacher or a, church staff member who would be willing to go through it. And I got lambasted, like in the local papers. There's one school superintendent, McLaughlin's idea is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Well, 153 people went through 4 days of training. and went back to their schools and says, hey, I have now had 40 hours of firearms and defensive training. Let me carry a firearm, or let me get a church team started. And that's kind of where we all can play a role in that is, they may have the heart, they may have the mindset, and let's couple that with the physical skills for those that are willing. We're not, like you said, we're not saying everybody carry a firearm or all the teachers need to carry, but let those that have that in their heart who are willing to face the lion, go down that road and see how they do with it.
Yeah. I mean, and I know that there's, with the FAST.E.R program, there's a lot of schools that, have sent, FAST.E.R typically, invite schools, administrators, teachers, that sort of thing. Come to the class for free. Come see what it's all about. Let's put you through it, etc. And schools have put additional measures in place to ensure that the teachers have passed like a psychological evaluation.
Right.
It's kind of a neat program because it's very secretive. The people that I trained alongside with, it's real big, no photos, none of this.
Right.
But I made sure to touch base with everybody in the classes that I attended, talk to them and find out what they were about. And I was amazed. I was going through the level 2 program, which is really cool because it's every day's a shoot house. Whereas like level 1's really fundamentals of shooting and stuff. But I got to meet a school administrator, the school principal, the school nurse, and the maintenance man going through level 2. This was their second time going through, and went around the table asking why they chose to do it. This is like day one. Why'd you do it? What do you think of the program? Do you like it? And the principal actually told me that he is very anti-gun.
Wow.
And that he only carries when he's at school. And that he doesn't feel that there is a need for a firearm outside of the school in his daily life, despite being married, having teenage kids. And I was really, kind of like, I lost my breath for a second. And I didn't want to ridicule or criticize because he's there. Right. He's going back to his school. He's going to be armed, and this guy can shoot, man. I mean, it's amazing. He's good, you know what I mean? And doing the shoot house, he's making the right decisions. So I asked him, I said, well, this is like your second time through the level 2 program. I mean, when you go out to eat with dinner and with your family and friends, like you don't feel compelled to maybe, I'm going to take this with me. And he adamantly said no. He said, I would gladly, there's other ways of handling situations. I would gladly surrender my life to protect my family without using a firearm. And that was just like, because it's like, but then you're dead and there's no one left to help your wife and your child.
Right.
So that puzzled me, but so this program, I've seen all ends of the spectrum. I've seen the other guys that retired military who were going through the program. I saw a school nurse who reminded me a lot of my wife, who has thought about doing school nursing. But and you can see where they're uncomfortable. You can see when they're faced with the shoot house challenges. Mm-hmm. The pauses and that sort of stuff, but they push through it. And you see the emotions involved because they actually live and work with children every day. That's why they signed up for this, to protect that innocent life and to help shape and mold those children's future. And here they are faced now with this new evil that, I'm sorry, it's here.
Right.
It's not going away. And no amount of laws that have been passed already have put a stop to this. There are massive restrictions in many states, and those states are still plagued with firearm violence. And I'm a big proponent of, your whole school can learn emergency medicine. Your whole school can learn how to fortify and protect and do things different. There's a lot of great programs out there, and I support doing any of those versus just waiting to see what happens. Faith without works is dead.
Yep. Well, like we talked earlier, the concentric rings of security and simple things, certainly many police departments will come in and give you advice, but you have people on your own campus now that common sense tells you that if you keep the bad guy at bay, don't let him inside the school. You keep your windows locked, keep your doors locked. You may have an entry that they come in and have to be buzzed in further. That may, fare poorly for the receptionist that has to sit there and talk to him, but at least you stop it from getting in the rest of the school. Those are fairly simple things that can be done today at fairly low cost. Let's stop it before they get into the school and start killing kids.
What has been the rhetoric up there in Iowa? What are you seeing being put out on regular news or social media? How is your culture in Iowa responding to this situation? What's it like up there? I mean, is Iowa pretty pro Second Amendment with little patches of anti, or is it more anti and little patches of pro?
Yeah, well, the problem is you have people that are vocal about Second Amendment and those that are afraid to say anything. And the folks that are anti-Second Amendment are probably the most vocal of all. And you can come with facts and correct statements and analytics, and you can't overpower the passion and the screaming and the crying of folks that are, no black guns, no assault rifles, all this stuff. It's
They typically chant. I mean, they
yeah,
chant. No one needs an AR. I mean, and
right.
that
And the whole crazy deer hunting thing, Biden mentioned that again the other day, and just as a matter of chance, Iowa, due to the proximity of the amount of hunters and the amount of public lands, we don't have much rifle hunting for deer in Iowa, with the exception of a couple tiers of counties where there's more spread out, lower population density, and usually only late in the season. And that's always been for larger calibers. Well, the Iowa DNR finally, with the worst timing ever, allowed 223 calibers to be used for deer hunting. And now the anti-gun people are, now the DNR is going to allow semi-automatic weapons for deer hunting. What kind of gun do you need to kill a deer? It's just convoluting the whole thing, but they're taking that one little thing that rifles have been allowed in Iowa in certain counties for a long time. It's just, you always had to have a 308 or larger, or some straight walled cartridges, various things, but now you can use 223.
The media has successfully re-educated
Yes.
America to believe that the AR-15 is a military style explosive device, that this is a man killer. That's actually what was used in a social media stream today, that this is a man killer used by the military that no law-abiding citizen needs. And I'm so sick and tired of hearing that. I have firearms in my closet that can make a car implode from over a mile away. We're not talking about the most dangerous instrument out there. The way I describe an AR-15 is it's my daughter's gun. Okay. It is built like a Barbie doll so that anybody can learn to use. And I mean, it's really like a training wheels, kick the training wheels off, because this person, is learning for the first time. It's one of the smallest caliber semi-automatic rifles that can be customized to fit the person who, with very little skill or knowledge, can. And that's exactly why you would choose it for the military. Okay. And we're going to pick on Marines and say, this is what crayon eaters need, so that they can be successful out there. Okay. It's from the 1950s. They're picking on a firearm that's been around since the 1950s. Okay. Semi-automatic handguns have been around since the late 1800s. This technology, for the most part, has not changed. Trust me. Every kebab, diddle you can imagine has been done. I'm frankly sick of seeing somebody come out with something and calling it new, and it's like, oh yeah, I've seen that.
Right. But you're using facts to try to argue with emotion now, and we never seem to get anywhere with that. I mean, just look at the simplicity of this event. The kid apparently used an AR style rifle to kill all these innocent children, but what did the good guy use to go in and whack the bad guy? Most likely the same thing. So why are you going to take this from the good people when this is the tool we need to defend against all these people that are going to get these rifles one way or the other? Don't keep me from being able to mount the proper defense.
It'll be interesting too to see whether or not the original officers responding, the local community officers, the RSOs, what were they armed with?
Yeah,
likely pistols, which is likely why this person may have had initially an advantage. And we might see law enforcement change. The few departments out there still that maybe are using shotguns in the trunk and haven't adopted putting ARs in the vehicles. We might see some more of that, being like, hey, we need to be able to respond to these incidents more quickly. We need an AR for every person. And then we get into budgets and we start talking about what it would cost to outfit and equip every guy, get them qualified and trained on this device, etc.
It's been a huge deal in Iowa. One of the greatest firearms guys I know recently retired from the Polk County Sheriff's Office in Des Moines. his whole mission during his 30 plus years in law enforcement was patrol rifle program. And it took that amount of time, basically through his whole career, to get it going,
Sure.
to get the proper training, to get the proper people, so that officers have a patrol rifle now when they're faced with situations like this, because they likely are going to be the first people there, while the Metro Star team, SWAT team, whatever your local jurisdiction has, mounts up and gets their vehicles and their kit and everything and gets to the scene in 45 minutes or an hour.
I see Adam shaking his head the entire time. I can't wait to get his
Okay.
thoughts on this before we
Yeah.
start wrapping up at the 1 hour point. Adam, talk to us about that. Talk to us about the patrol rifle and your thoughts and feelings on the AR-15, this mass murdering device.
It took forever for our department to finally come up with a rifle program to where everybody had one. I thought it was crazy. It's such an easy rifle to use, and it works so well, and you can be so highly accurate, which is desperately needed in an active killer event, right? High accuracy, and far easier than the handgun, especially the way law enforcement training is. So it's much easier to do. So it's the proper way to go. It does the right things. But there's something to be said for the fact that the handgun does a wonderful job in the confines of a school, right? We're not talking punching through walls very often. We're talking closer quarters. The handguns does just as much or as well as the AR does. I mean, it's a great tool if you've got it, you've trained with it for the AR. But just imagine if we got the allowance to have our school staff, our teachers, and the other staff members, from the principal to the janitor, those who are willing to be able to carry guns in our schools, and they got the training that they need to be able to be good with a handgun, which is not hard to do, right? We all do that with these people. We train them very quickly in a very short amount of time. Imagine if we got 1 out of 50, 1 out of 25, maybe 1 out of 10. I don't care if somebody comes with an AK-47, they come in there with an AR-15. I don't care what they come in with. They can come in with a deer hunting rifle for all I care. They can come with a pump action or automatic shotgun. If we had 1 out of 25 teachers in America trained with just a handgun to where they could do good with it, in the confines with which they're doing, they would do an incredible job. And we would cut down on the mass killings and the mass shootings in America in the school system. I would think multiple folds over. And so though the rifle is a great idea, every officer should have those. That's the first thing I'm going to grab, or my hot little wife as a cop's going to grab the second active shooter incident goes off. Still, just having just a basic handgun in the school systems can mitigate any one of these things, certainly lessen them far more than what we've seen just now in Texas and other places, because they're there immediately in the moment, willing and trained. They can put effective rounds down on target, and these active shooters are cowards, right? It's not very often you find a dirtbag that's got some stones, got some bravery to him. They usually, at the first signs of any type of halfway decent resistance, off themselves, right? Or run away like the little cowards they are. And if we just had some means of active resistance in there, literally just a tiny fraction of the teachers or the staff willing to do so, boy, we could cut down on these a huge amount. And that way we're not waiting for some cop to finally show up in 2 or 3 or 10 minutes with an AR-15, because it's been taken care of ahead of time.
And let it be known. You don't have to say who the teachers are with modern concealments and all the fancy Enigma rigs and all the stuff that's out on. Nobody knows who has the guns in the school, but certainly let it be known to the bad guys out there that we have teachers who will defend with lethal force. Move on.
That was another thing I found fascinating when I attended the F.A.S.T.E.R training level 2. The school janitor told me that, he had difficulty finding the right holster because he's crawling around through holes and stuff like that all the time. He had to find something that worked for laying on his belly, laying on his back, that wouldn't print or show, and because he kept it concealed. But even more fascinating was he had 2 kids that attended his school who he's been carrying now for 5 years. They don't know that he owns a gun. They don't know that he takes it with him to school every day, takes his kids, drops them off, goes and does his work, picks them up, takes them home. Nobody knows. And I found that so incredibly like awesome and inspiring. Like, okay, so it can be done. It can be done. Here's a guy who's in the most confined positions, okay, all over school campus where anybody might see what's going on. And he's been able to keep this a secret for 5 years, even with his kids physically present. And he's like, and they run up and they hug me and I got to twist my hip so that they, don't get to my appendix, etc. And I was like, yeah, those are all things that I have naturally adopted that I forgot about from years ago.
And the beauty is that the people that work in the school system are truly loving individuals, right? They go into that type of profession because they love, as the whole, our children. They want to educate them and grow them. They're loving, caring people. And so with that mindset, the thousands of teachers I've had go through our training courses, they truly see the need. They want to. And if they could just be allowed to, they would happily, out of a sense of love, Dave, hide the fact, right? Conceal the fact they're concealed carry holders. They don't want kids to know that. You don't want to traumatize kids if that does that. And you don't want to cause dissension amongst other teachers, but they would hide the fact so that when the moment comes, they can do what they need to do. There's untold thousands of teachers, tens of thousands of teachers across this country who want to do that.
Yeah.
They just need to be able to. And with all the equipment and gear that is out there to be able to do that, they could easily do it the same way the janitor you're talking about, and they could be the first responders. And it doesn't take but a small fraction of them to do it, and we would effectively shut down or limit these type of situations here in the U.S.
When I try to equate it to, we haven't lost a child in a school fire since the 1960s. Okay, because we've redesigned schools, we've installed all sorts of fire prevention devices, locking doors, built our classrooms to operate like chimneys so fires can't spread. We have, smoke detectors, smog detectors. Now every, building's required to have an AED on site because teachers and heart attacks. Like, we take every preventable measure for every possible catastrophe. I know states, schools that have, they live in Tornado Alley that have, custom shelters and basements and schools built to resist tornadoes. Like, now we're talking about flooding. Okay. Flooding. We can prevent flooding, for crying out loud. No child gets drowned. Those are people who saw where the school was being built and said, okay, we realistically, we need to think about these things. Has that stopped school fires? No, there's been 3,500 last year, school fires on school campuses, but we haven't lost a child because we've taken the preventative steps. We've looked at every possible way we can prevent this sort of stuff from happening. And I think really the big thing that takeaway that I'm getting right now from this in this time in history, okay, is that what we've been doing in the past as a Second Amendment community, staying silent, trying not to be argumentative, and just take the passive route, has failed us over and over and over again. I think it's more important now that we educate folks, that we stand firm on our position, and we help get more people involved in the conversation. And every firearms trainer, I hope, will get involved in some measure with their local law enforcement department and reach out to schools, communities, and churches and help provide the whatever training they need, and reach out to the guys who are really professionals at doing this for advice. And we need to come together as a community if we really want to stop this stuff from happening in the future and start controlling the narrative and stop letting the media tell us this is how it is. This is this, and coming up with cool catchphrases that they're going to use in the next, election. And we need to control our local politicians. If we want to prevent Washington from doing what they're doing, then we need to start focusing more on our state's rights, our state, local elected leaders, so that we can control what goes on up the hill. John, what are your thoughts on that?
100%. The time for taking a stand is now. The time for not being silent is now. We can do it professionally and, without being argumentative and using bad language. But the truth is the truth, and we stand on the truth, and we need to not be afraid to say it the way it is.
Adam?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. This is going to take, unfortunately, even more conversations. But no matter what, no matter how heated it is on the other side of the aisle in this, it behooves us, and I think it's a responsibility for us to remain the most polite, the most respectful, the most considerate of other points of view, the most kind, while also dealing with this in a way that has as much facts as possible that can be efficiently presented of what active shooters incidents are like, how time, literally seconds, matter in this case, how local cops can't be there. There's so many factors that need to be presented, and I know they've been presented before, but you have to keep still beating that bell, and you still have to keep sounding the alarm, but with such kindness and respect that it doesn't just automatically turn off the other side. And then maybe, just maybe, over time they'll start listening. Unfortunately, I believe it's going to be after multiple more of these incidents. But to ultimately get to the end goal of getting these schools and these teachers armed as they should be and trained as they should be, it's going to have to it's going to have to be us who keep sounding the alarm, but in the kindest, most respectful, informed ways we possibly can.
Yeah, and as Dave mentioned, parents need to be involved. You need to be on your school board. You need your PTA. You need to make your voice heard right now. Otherwise, the anti-gun side is just going to keep running roughshod and shoot everything we're trying to come up with down.
Well, we just saw what happened in Virginia, right? Where they got all mad about some of the politics in there, and you had massive school meetings. At the school board meetings, we happen to have that in the town that I was from, Grand Junction, and that affected some change. So you're right, John. We've got to go to these school board meetings and keep pressing it, keep pushing it, being the squeaky wheel in a sense, until this is finally heard. Squeaky wheel with respect and information, but it's got to be heard. It's got to be heard on the local level, and so much so to where it eventually trickles up to the higher level, to where maybe, just eventually, maybe they'll learn and listen.
Well, I want to thank you guys for after a full day's work. My day started at 4 a.m. What time did yours start, John?
4 a.m.
Oh my goodness, man. And Adam, what time did your time start today?
Well, it stayed late, very, very late. And then it started, I don't know, 6:30, 6 o'clock, I think, when the boys started yammering off and woke me up.
You've been running for quite a while, traveling around the U.S. And John, if folks in Iowa want to reach out to you, how can they get a hold of you?
Easiest way is through the Iowa Firearms Coalition. It's iowafc.org. You can email me directly through there, or we have a Facebook page. And if you're from Iowa and watch me on TV, I've got a couple Facebook pages, and certainly with my comments that I've written, many hundreds of comments. So I'll be going through those and at least responding to the ones that deserve a response.
And John, if you don't mind, send me some of those links and stuff in an email, and I'll be sure to add them in the comment section here. I plan on uploading this to the Armed Republic Radio YouTube page. Same goes for you, Adam. I know that you're recently moved to Arizona, but you're also still conducting courses out of Grand Junction, Colorado. Tell everybody how they can get a hold of you, and we'll do the same thing.
So, right, my company, I don't know if you can read this the right way, but just defenders-usa.com. I can be reached through there, or on the Defenders USA Facebook page. And my contact info is there, phone number, whatever. Yeah, email is there. But yeah, we're still mainly based in Colorado, but I'm starting to run courses in the Arizona area too.
Fantastic. So, again, everybody, my name's Dave Laird. I own Dynamic Combative Solutions. I'll put my information down there at the bottom as well. We have a couple of classes coming up here in the near future, but again, my focus this year is going to be a lot of the pro Second Amendment and trying to get more FAST-ER courses going here in the Western region, based out of Arizona, and working real hard with our Arizona state legislation to help us get stronger moving forward. Arizona's been a great Second Amendment state, but we just aren't doing enough, in my humble opinion. So appreciate everybody's time tonight. And guys, again, thanks for giving me your time.
Yeah, appreciate all you do, guys. Take care.